fellow human beings, PowerGamer here. You ever hear that joke about the hedgehog that tried to go 3D? Yeah, well, you shouldn't joke about that. It's a very serious issue.
Sonic Adventure, the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end. I think we all know the deal behind this game and why it was such a turning point, but I'll give you the quick version in case you don't. After the success of the Genesis Sonic games, Sega was looking to make a 3D Sonic game to release on their next console, the Saturn. The game was known as Sonic X-treme and was to be developed by STI, still can't get over that name, but sadly the game suffered from multiple setbacks and Yuji Naka ended up heading back to Japan because he believed that the original Sonic team should handle this title. Because of this, Sonic X-treme was cancelled and the Saturn ended up being a commercial failure. It had other issues, but Sonic was Sega's flagship franchise, so not having an original title definitely played a part in the system's shortcomings. Conception for the real game began in August of 1996 when developer Takashi Iizuka, I assume I butchered that name, proposed a more story-driven adventure. So they got to work, but the Saturn's limitations made development difficult, and when they were told Sega was nearing completion on their next console, the Dreamcast, they decided to make it for that system instead. Iizuka served as the director of this game while Naka was a producer. It was one of the largest games ever made at the time, and the development team ended up consisting of over 100 people. Because they wanted a higher emphasis on story, this was the first Sonic game to use full voice acting, and the world and characters received pretty noticeable redesigns. They also wanted to implement more gameplay styles to appeal to larger masses. Sonic Adventure was released as the launch title for the Dreamcast on December 23rd, 1998 in Japan, with other countries getting it in the fall of 1999. It was highly acclaimed upon its release, with many people considering it a true step forward for the series, but nowadays reception has become a lot more divisive. This game has a lot of fans, but it also has a lot of haters. This was definitely a turning point for the Sonic series, as the franchise went from being on top of the world to something no one can really agree on. But if you've been active on the internet for the last decade, you know all this by now. Saying Sonic struggled to go 3D has become such an overused phrase they make t-shirts out of it at this point. But either way, the game was a commercial hit. It is the best-selling Dreamcast game ever, with a whopping 2.5 million copies. Yet despite having some great titles, the Dreamcast was an overall failure, and as a result, Sega ended up becoming a third-party company. This resulted in them creating an enhanced port of the game titled Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, which was released for the GameCube in 2003, and this version was later released on PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2010.
I have technically played this game before, but I only played a couple of levels, so that's not really enough to form a full opinion. I have played Sonic Adventure 2 in its entirety, though. Opinions seem to be all over the map on this game, so I'm excited to finally be able to form my own, and I will be playing the DX version, which I know everyone says is a butchered port, but I don't have a Dreamcast, so this is my only option.
We get a pretty solid opening cutscene upon booting up the game. A city is looking fairly normal until suddenly water begins to erupt from the sewers. We see Sonic running at high speed, a large airship, Angel Island falling into the water, and glimpses of all the characters we're going to be playing as. This then brings us to the title screen and selecting Adventure Mode. The game is split up into 6 campaigns following 6 different characters: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy returning from Sonic CD, and newcomers Big the Cat and E102 Gamma. Because of this, the story is told in a non-linear fashion, so things will be pretty out of order. Let's just start with the basics of each character. Sonic starts out running through a large city known as Station Square, when suddenly it's attacked by this weird water monster known as Chaos. No, not that one. Not that one either. The police try to intervene. Yes, there's actually police in this universe now, but they're unable to stop Chaos, so Sonic takes over. We then get a really easy fight against Chaos Zero, who stretches his arms and goes down in a few hits. Chaos disappears, and a couple days later, Sonic sees Tails flying, but he crashes, so Sonic goes to find him. Tails tells Sonic he's constructing a new plane called the Tornado 2 that's powered by a Chaos Emerald, and he was testing it out. Sonic and Tails then head to the nearby Mystic Ruins, where they come face to face with Dr. Robotnik. Although Sonic calls him Eggman because of how his ship looks like an egg, and from this point on, he becomes referred to as Eggman throughout the rest of the series.
I know he was always called Eggman in Japan, but this is the one where it becomes official, at least in the English version, that Robotnik is his actual real name, and Eggman is just a nickname that Sonic gives him, and everyone else just goes along with it, including the Doctor himself in later games.
Eggman then reveals he's controlling Chaos and is attempting to steal the Chaos Emeralds to harness their power. He'll then use said power to destroy Station Square and build his own kingdom over the remnants called Robotnik Land. So Sonic and Tails set out to find the Chaos Emeralds before Robotnik does. And no, there's no explanation for why they don't have the Chaos Emeralds anymore, and there never will be for every other game in the entire series. Now, Tails' story starts with him testing out his new plane, but he crashes. After that, pretty much everything plays out the same as Sonic's story, at least in the beginning. Knuckles' story opens with him protecting the Master Emerald on Angel Island when Eggman attacks and chaos shows up. The Master Emerald is shattered, so Knuckles sets out on a quest to find the broken pieces and rebuild it. Next is Amy, who has a completely new design than before, and she's wandering through Station Square wishing she can hang out with Sonic. She then finds this little bird she names Birdie, and after taking him in, they're both attacked by this large robot named Zero that was built by Eggman. Amy flees and decides to protect Birdie as best she can. As for the two new characters, Big the Cat is a large purple cat living in the forest with his pet frog, Froggy. Froggy gets possessed by this water that's apparently Chaos's tail, swallows a Chaos Emerald, and runs off with it. Big gets scared for his friend, so he chases after him. And finally is Gamma, who's a robot built by Eggman to find the Chaos Emeralds. Gamma initially follows Eggman's orders, but after a run-in with Amy, he questions his purpose and defies his programming, wanting to escape with his fellow robots. And that's about it, really. Eggman is attempting to collect the Chaos Emeralds to power up Chaos, and all the other characters get involved. Sonic wants to stop Eggman, Tails wants to help Sonic, Knuckles wants to rebuild the Master Emerald, Amy wants to help Birdie, Big wants to find Froggy, and Gamma wants to help his friends. Every now and then, these plot points will cross over with each other, and each character receives visions of the past thanks to the spirit of this ancient echidna girl named Tikal, which provides some backstory.
It's a fairly basic story, but it does the job well enough. Eggman and Chaos are decent enough threats, most of the characters are likable, and a lot of them even have small character arcs they go through, which is pretty cool.
This game's graphics are honestly really good for 1998. The Dreamcast was the most powerful console out at the time, and overall things look really good. The environments are varied and decently detailed, and the character models look solid. Although in the DX version they're a lot shinier, which can make them look kinda plasticky. The same praise can't be said for the animations, though. Yikes, the way the characters move, especially their mouths, is just awful. And this is an issue in both versions, by the way. The voice acting is pretty mixed. Most of the characters sound good, although Tails can be a little awkward, and Big is super annoying, which is weird because he has the same voice actor as Duke Nukem, and he was much better in that game. I don't know, I think this is more on the director than the actor. The sound mixing, though, is straight up awful. There are so many times where it's nearly impossible to hear what the characters are saying because of how loud the music is.
I'm glad you're okay.
Thankfully, the music itself is really good. This game's soundtrack honestly might be even better than the classic games. It is absolutely fantastic, and I love how almost all of the characters have their own distinct themes.
The gameplay varies a lot depending on which character you're playing as, but they do have some similar elements.
Most of this game is structured like the classic Sonic games, only now in 3D. Your goal is to simply reach the end of the stage while collecting rings for health and extra lives. Every character can jump on enemies, as well as perform a secondary action, which I'll go more into later. You can still find power-ups like the shield, which gives you an extra hit, the speed shoes, which make you run faster, although they only last like 10 seconds, and this thing, which makes you invincible. The only elemental shield that comes back is the electric shield, and all it does is draw on rings. You can't double jump or block electric hazards anymore. The camera automatically follows you, but you can adjust it with the shoulder buttons, and most of the time it works, but there are moments where it can snag. The game is divided into two main modes, the adventure field and the action stages. The action stages are the standard levels, while the adventure field is the hub world. This is mainly composed of two areas, Station Square and the Mystic Ruins. Each one has a bunch of different areas you have to travel to reach the next level. And weirdly enough, there are actual people you can talk to in this game. Yeah, in previous Sonic games, the only human was Eggman, but now there's a bunch of people you can talk to for some flavor text, and it's kinda surreal. You can also find upgrades that give characters new abilities. Honestly, I'm not a fan of this place. You usually have to complete some sort of puzzle in order to unlock the next level, and it's not always clear what that is. Many times you have to find some miscellaneous object, it's not always clear where they are, and some of them don't even do anything. You can touch this red sparkle to get a hint from Tikal, but even those can only go so far. At the very least, the areas aren't that big, and you do have a map to help navigate, but it can still be really confusing. I swear, I spent at least 20% of my time in this game just running around the hub world trying to figure out what to do.
The adventure field is consistent throughout the whole game, but the action stages vary wildly, so we're gonna have to go character by character with these.
Well, Sonic's levels are pretty much a 3D version of the older games. You just need to reach the end of the stage. You can jump, roll, and do the spin dash, which is much more powerful in this game, but he has one major addition to his moveset, the homing attack. If you push the jump button in the air while near an enemy, Sonic will automatically home in on them to kill it. You can also do this with item capsules and these bumpers that launch you. This was added to give you something more precise than jumping on an enemy, and it works pretty well. Not only can it make killing them much easier, but occasionally it's incorporated into the level design, which makes things more unique. The only issue is that it doesn't always work. If you aren't near an enemy, you'll do this little air dash instead of the homing attack, and both of these are on the same button. So you can end up doing one when you want to do the other, and that's not fun. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's infuriating. For Sonic's upgrades, he gets the light speed shoes, which let you do the light dash. If you charge up the spin dash, you can then boost along a line of rings that are close to each other. This is a neat idea, but it isn't used very often. You also get this ancient light, which lets you do the same thing only you home in at a bunch of enemies in a row. Aside from the new additions, Sonic controls pretty well. The controls can be a little sensitive, but that's only an issue when you want to collect a line of rings. When you're just just running around the levels, it feels really good. Sonic's momentum feels just as good as it did in the Genesis games, and while the jump is a little floaty, the platforming never gets too intense. You can still gain a large amount of speed, but you don't go too fast to the point where it's uncontrollable, and the level design accommodates that perfectly. Like the 2D games, each level has multiple paths to take, which encourages multiple run-throughs. You can blast through the levels as fast as possible, but you can also explore your surroundings, and the game will often reward your curiosity. Overall, Sonic's levels are great. They feel like a true 3D evolution of what was seen in the older games, and it's super fun to play. The only issue is that there's a lot of these speed boosters that blast you forward automatically, and because of that, it can feel like the game is playing itself.
But of course, Sonic is only a fraction in the game, so how do the other characters fare?
Well, Tails is also relatively unchanged from his Genesis counterpart. He can still fly, although it doesn't last as long, and roll into a ball to gain speed. He can't do the spin dash anymore, but he does have this tail swipe attack, which is so short-ranged it's almost useless, until you get the rhythm badge, which lets you do it endlessly. He also gets the jet anklet, which lets you fly faster. Tails' levels are very similar to Sonic, which isn't too surprising since they're together for most of the story. Although these ones have a higher emphasis on speed, which is ironic since you'd think that would be Sonic's thing. Tails wants to assist Sonic as much as he can, so the main objective is to reach the end of the level before Sonic does. Thanks to his flight, Tails is able to avoid a lot of obstacles Sonic has to deal with, and the levels have a lot of rings that give you speed boost if you fly through them. You fail if Sonic reaches the end of the level before you, but that shouldn't be an issue since these levels are relatively easy, and if you die, Sonic resets at the checkpoint you do. Tails' levels are pretty solid. They're definitely the easiest part of the game, but it is fun seeing some of the different tricks you can pull off, and ways you can clear levels, since like with Sonic, there's multiple paths you can take to reach the end. Now, Knuckles' levels are wildly different. Control-wise, he's the same as previously. He can glide, climb walls, and like Tails, he can't spin dash anymore. Instead, he can do this 3-punch combo, which makes a lot more sense if you ask me. His upgrades are the shovel claws, which let you dig underground, and the fighting gloves, which let you charge up this super attack. The levels have him searching for the Master Emerald pieces. Instead of them just being placed at the end of the stage, these levels are much more open and have an emphasis on exploration. 3 emerald pieces are hidden in every stage, and when you get closer to one of them, this radar goes off and will turn blue, then green, then orange, and finally red. Once you find a piece, grab it, and the level instantly ends when you get all 3. Some pieces are out in the open, but others are hidden in boxes or enemies. The location of the pieces is random every time, but you can find the Takala Sparkle, who will point you in the direction of the nearest one. These levels are actually really fun. Searching for the emerald pieces can be really exciting, and it is immensely satisfying to find them, especially in a short amount of time.
And while those 3 were already playable in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the other characters are playable for the first time ever. 10 mixed results.
Amy finally makes her playable debut, and she controls really differently. Unlike the other characters, she can't roll or jump on enemies. She has to use her weapon, which is this giant hammer. I assume she decided to purchase this after Sonic CD because it would have made short work of Metal Sonic. She can whack enemies with it normally, but if you're running, she does this launch attack, which gives you a boost, and her upgrade is the Warrior Feather that lets you do the spin attack. It is almost useless since it's super short, you can't move, and most of the enemies have ranged attacks. You even get dizzy if you do it for too long. Amy's levels are more like Sonic and Tails, where the goal is to simply get to the end. The main gimmick, though, is Zero the robot constantly chasing you down and shooting you. You can use the hammer to stun him for a second, but there's no way to get rid of him for good. He'll keep following you until you finish the level, or he decides to take a siesta and doesn't show up. He's really easy to avoid, thankfully, so the biggest issue is this annoying ringing that plays when he attacks. The only other thing added is this bomb power, which destroys all enemies on screen and can only be found in Amy's levels. I'm not really a fan of these. They're not horribly designed, but Amy herself is a lot stiffer than Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Her hammer also has a half-second delay to it, which can lead to you taking unnecessary hits. She's not terrible, but I don't think she's that fun to play as.
Alright, let's get this over with.
Big is by far the most hated part of this entire game, and I can safely say he lives up to the hype. He moves the slowest, can't jump on enemies, and his only method of defense is whacking them with a fishing pole. His only real upgrade is the life ring, which lets him float on water. You can hold the jump button to sink to the bottom, but you can't just jump out. You have to sink and then bounce up. It is a huge pain, especially when the ground is slightly raised. But if you're thinking that sounds absolutely horrible for a platformer, don't worry, because Big's levels aren't about platforming. They're about fishing. Yeah, fishing in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. These levels are tiny little areas with water in them. You have to figure out where Froggy is, cast your line, wait for him to bite, and then reel him back in by holding the action button and moving the joystick. But you gotta be careful because if the line breaks, you lose a life. You can also catch other fish for some bonus points, and even find lures to catch bigger fish, but I don't know why you would want to because this absolutely sucks. The fishing controls are insanely annoying, Froggy's biting is wildly inconsistent, and he can let go at any time for seemingly no reason. This is not fun at all and isn't what you would want in a Sonic game. I seriously have no idea why this is here, but I really want to see how they came up with it.
Alright team, we're gonna need some new playable characters for Sonic's big 3D debut. Anyone have any ideas? How about a fat purple cat that's an idiot? That could work. But what would his gameplay be? This weekend I'm going fishing. That's perfect!
And now we reach the final character, Gamma. Gamma's levels are less about platforming and more about shooting. They're the most linear of the levels, and all of them have a time limit which you refill by killing enemies. By holding down the button, Gamma will lock on to any nearby targets, and when you let go, he'll fire at all of them. The more targets you shoot in one go, the more points you get. His upgrades are the Jet Booster, which lets you hover in the air, kinda like Knuckles, and the Laser Blaster, which makes your shots more powerful. Gamma's probably the least interesting of the characters. He controls well enough, and his levels are fine, but they're over pretty quickly and feel kinda mindless. He's not terrible, but he's not particularly amazing either. The only thing I don't like about him is this annoying ringing that happens when you hold down the shoot button.
While each character has pretty different gameplay styles, the levels themselves are very similar to each other.
You have to beat 32 total levels across the whole game, but that number is not divided evenly amongst all the characters. Sonic has 10 stages to go through, Tails, Knuckles, and Gamma all have 5, Big has 4, and Amy has 3. Here's the thing though, the game only has about 12 unique levels, and most of the characters go through the same ones. Luckily this isn't a huge issue, since almost all of them feel pretty differently, so it's very much like how the zones worked in the 2D games. The only difference is the length. Some of these levels can be beaten in less than 2 minutes, while others can take over 10. Levels have a decent amount of checkpoints, but if you get a game over, you have to start the whole level all over again, which is pretty frustrating. At the end of each level, you're given an emblem, which serves as a mark of progression. Every level actually has 3 different objectives to beat. The C mission is just beating the level in story mode, while the B and A missions give you another objective, like collecting enough rings or beating it fast enough. These extra missions aren't mandatory to beat the game, they just give you more emblems. You do unlock a bonus level if you collect all the emblems, but I did not feel the need to do so. The DX version also adds these missions you can find in the adventure field, which give you a small objective. They're kinda cute, but a distraction at best. And the DX version also lets you unlock some Sonic games that were released for the Game Gear, which is honestly a really cool bonus feature.
That's pretty much the main game, but before we can get into the actual levels, there is one element left to discuss, and it is quite possibly the most beloved thing about this entire package. The Chow Garden.
In the hub world, you can find doors that take you to this large garden. Here, you can hatch these adorable little guys called Chow from these eggs, and this is pretty much a virtual pet simulator. The Chow have different stats you can raise by giving them fruit you find in the garden or animals you find in the levels. You can then enter a Chow in these races, which you have no control over. How well they do is determined by their stats. If you want to win them all, you have to max out their stats, and to do that, you need to grind a lot of resources and breed your Chow to mix their stats together. And what's really cool is that depending on the version, you can transfer your Chow to the Dreamcast's VMU or the Game Boy Advance and level them up on the go. It is fun to raise your Chow, but it takes a while, and it only gives you more emblems, so I didn't spend much time on this. And now let's get back to the story. We'll start with Sonic. After defeating Chaos Zero, Sonic is lounging in the Station Square Hotel where he sees Tails fly overhead and crash. This leads to our first level, Emerald Coast, a great introduction to Sonic's 3D controls. You're on a large beach with plenty of space to run around, you can bounce off these bumpers, and there's even a part where you run from a killer whale as it destroys a dock. Sonic finds Tails, and the two head back to the hotel where Tails talks about his new plane. He says he has something to show Sonic at his workshop in the Mystic Ruins, so we head there and find Eggman, who attacks with the Egg Hornet. He shoots some missiles, charges, and then you homing attack him. Like most boss fights in this game, it's pathetic. Eggman manages to steal Tails' Chaos Emerald and feeds it to Chaos, revealing his plan. He flies off, and Sonic says they need to find the other emeralds before Eggman does. Then you grab this key and take it in a cave to reach Windy Valley. This level has you run through the mountains and use the wind to reach new areas. Once again, a really fun level. Get a Chaos Emerald and head back to Station Square. The hotel casino is now open, but you need to go into the sewers and get the Lightspeed shoes to open the door. This leads to Casinopolis. To get the Chaos Emeralds, you need to collect as many rings as possible and have this crane shake them out of you to reach an upper area. You do this by going in these doors and playing pinball. Yeah, this isn't combining pinball and platforming like Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2, it's just straight up pinball. Which is fine by me, I love a good pinball game. Depending on which one you enter, you can get these cards or spin these slot wheels.
And the card one is inspired by another game made by Sonic Team called Nights into Dreams, which is really cool. And apparently they were going to use that game's engine to model Sonic Extreme, but Yuji Naka wouldn't let them, hence partially why the game was cancelled. Lovely!
After this, Eggman attacks and steals one of their Chaos Emeralds, but they manage to keep the other one. This causes an ice key to appear in an alley, which you take to the Mystic Ruins. Go up here and use it to open Ice Cap. This level stinks. A large part of it is climbing on these icicles, and you move so freaking slowly. But it gets better in the second half when it becomes a snowboarding level, proving that this is the same place as Ice Cap Zone from Sonic 3, and likely inspiring that scene in the second Sonic movie. Upon exiting, you find Knuckles, who attacks Sonic, demanding he hands over the emeralds for some reason. Yeah, there are a few moments in this game where you fight the other playable characters, and they are all piss easy. During this scuffle, Sonic loses the emeralds, and Eggman swoops in and grabs them. You're then attacked by the newly upgraded Chaos 4. Suddenly, we're in a swamp now, and you have to wait for him to surface to attack while avoiding these shockwaves and charges. Harder than the last one, but still easy since you can easily jump on the water. Eggman then summons this giant ship called the Egg Carrier and escapes. Knuckles tells them to go on without him, so Tails takes Sonic to his workshop and busts out the Tornado 1 from Sonic 2. This leads into our first sub-game, Sky Chase. Yeah, this game has a handful of mini-games thrown in. Here the game becomes a watered-down Star Fox clone. You fly in the plane and shoot everything in sight. It's okay, but kinda bland. They get shot down by this laser, and Sonic lands in Station Square where he runs into Amy. She tells him about Birdie and says they're gonna follow him, much to his dismay. They then head to Twinkle Park, which is a large amusement park area, and it's pretty cool. You've got these castles, field areas, annoying bumper cars, and more. Beating this level unlocks another sub-game, Twinkle Circuit, where you race in a bumper car. Sonic and Amy get separated, so Sonic moves on with his day.
Can't say I blame him.
We then grab this key card and open the door to Speed Highway, a large city level with a bunch of winding paths and this iconic scene of Sonic breaking the laws of physics because it's cool. Sonic returns to the Mystic Ruins where he finds Amy being captured by Zero. Sonic tries to intervene, but Eggman shows up and absorbs them into the Egg Carrier. This opens this cave, allowing Sonic to find the ancient light and reach Red Mountain. This level's pretty similar to Windy Valley, only with less wind, a lava cave, and going on monkey bars backwards. Upon exiting the cave, Tails picks up Sonic in his upgraded Tornado 2, and we have another round of Sky Chase. They land on the Egg Carrier, but Eggman transforms it so they can't reach him. This leads to Sky Deck, a level where you navigate the ship on these railings and have to avoid giant cannons. This level's kinda cool, but it goes on for ages. They then find Amy, but Eggman has Gamma attack them. After a fight, Amy tells you to stop, claiming Gamma as her friend. Sonic doesn't question this, and instead goes inside the captain's room to change the ship back. Then you have to fight Chaos 6, and Big shows up looking for Froggy. Chaos causes shockwaves and tries to eat you, while Eggman flies around dropping these capsules. You have to hit these capsules and then throw them at Chaos to freeze him before attacking. Honestly, not a bad fight. Knuckles randomly appears and Eggman flies off, but Sonic chases after him. He winds up at this temple and sees a red sparkle, which he follows inside, leading to Lost World. You have to run through these ruins while raising water, running on these wall panels, lighting the path, and running from a boulder. I smell plagiarism. Much like Skydeck, this level goes on for ages. At the center of this temple, the sparkle gives Sonic a vision of the past. We see the Temple of the Master Emerald burning, and Tikal says she needs to stop it. Sonic wakes up and runs after Eggman, leading to his last stage, Final Egg. It's a giant gauntlet full of robots and machine parts. It can take ages to go through and be pretty freaking hard. I spent half an hour on this level. At the end, Eggman attacks Sonic using this giant robot called the Egg Viper. He pops up shooting lasers and says the exact same dialogue every time, which is really annoying.
Get a load of this! 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 Get a load of this!
Eventually he opens up and you have to homing attack him. As the fight goes on, he'll move further away, so you have to use more homing attacks, he'll destroy the platform you're standing on, and in the end you have to jump on these spinning blades to reach him. This fight is really cheap and not very fun. Eventually it's destroyed, Eggman flees in shame, Sonic reunites with Tails, and they run off together, content that the day is saved. And every character in this game has their own credit sequence, complete with their own images and theme song.
And all of that was just Sonic's campaign. Thankfully, the rest of them are only about half as long, so things should be a bit easier from here.
Now let's move on to Tails. After meeting up with Sonic, everything plays out the same, including fighting the Egg Hornet. The fight is identical, only it's a little bit harder since Tails doesn't have the homing attack. After that, we go to Windy Valley, and it's almost the same as Sonic's campaign, only with the effective time limit and the previously mentioned boost rings. After that, we once again get the Chaos Emerald and head to Casinopolis. This level is completely different since you're not playing pinball, it's an actual platforming level. And it's honestly pretty boring since it's super linear and not visually interesting. You're just running through what looks like an air vent. Then Eggman shows up, steals the emerald, and we go to Ice Cap, which is just the snowboarding section this time. We then fight Knuckles and Chaos 4, and again, the fights are exactly the same as with Sonic. Sky Chase again, and now the story actually starts to differ from Sonic's campaign. After the plane gets shot, Tails crashes in the Mystic Ruins and has a memory of the time he first met Sonic. He realizes he owes a lot to Sonic and heads to find a Chaos Emerald in a new sub-game called Sand Hill. It's another snowboarding level, or more accurately, sandboarding. It controls the same, but now you go through these rings for a speed boost. Much like Ice Cap, it's pretty fun. Tails finds a Chaos Emerald, as well as Froggy, which causes a flashback, much like Sonic, and he sees the ancient Echidna tribe. He speaks with Tikal, who says the servers are the 7 emeralds, and the one that unites them is Chaos. That sure sounds vague enough to mean something poetic. It's like an English assignment. Tails wakes up and Big runs for Froggy, but trips, causing him to get away. Big runs off, and Tails uses his Chaos Emerald to power the Tornado 2. He then flies off, grabs Sonic, Sky Chase 2, and they arrive on the Egg Carrier. And now things repeat themselves again. We go through the Sky Deck, which is much easier thanks to being able to fly, fight Gamma until Amy intervenes, but then while Sonic fights Chaos, Tails escapes with Amy as the Egg Carrier comes crashing down. They land in Station Square and find Eggman man nearby. He vows to still destroy the city and fires a missile that ends up not exploding.
Remind me how this guy's a genius again?
He goes to detonate it himself, but Tails follows, leading to his final level, Speed Highway. This time you're racing Eggman instead of Sonic, and while the level looks the same as last time, it feels really different since they take full advantage of Tails' flight and add some massive gaps you have to go across or avoid altogether. It's really cool, and easily the hardest Tails level. Tails reaches the missile first and presumably deactivates it, but Eggman isn't done yet. He activates the Egg Walker, but Tails decides to stand up to him. The machine walks forward, launching bombs that are really easy to dodge, and you want to wait until it stomps and causes these shockwaves to tail swipe the legs. This lowers the center and lets you jump on it. After a few hits, kaboom! Tails is happy he was able to stop Eggman by himself and flies off to reunite with Sonic. So much for independence. Next up is Knuckles. After the Master Emerald was shattered, he heads to Station Square. By destroying this barrier in front of City Hall, you can reach Speed Highway? Wow, Tails' last level is Knuckles' first. Though the Speed Highway is more of a speed street corner, it is pretty fun to explore. After that, it's night, so you know what that means. Gambling our life savings away at Casinopolis. It's pretty much the same as when Sonic was here, only without the pinball games. After getting the pieces, Knuckles gets his Tikal vision much earlier than the others. We see Tikal pleading with her father to not invade other villages, but he claims it's for the greater good. Knuckles then sees Eggman going up the hotel elevator and follows him, assuming he has pieces of the Master Emerald, but it's actually a Chaos Emerald, which he feeds to Chaos. So Knuckles has to fight Chaos 2, who stretches his arms, bounces as a bubble, and blocks your attacks with the shield. You need to punch the bubble and wait until he stops moving to glide into his head. Eggman tells Knuckles that Sonic is after the Master Emerald, and then leaves. Knuckles believes him because obviously he should. Now we head back to Mystic Ruins, grab the Shovel Claws to get this key, and head to Red Mountain. It's a bunch of floating rocks, and I beat it in less than 2 minutes. Knuckles then finds Sonic and thinks he has pieces of the Master Emerald.
Ah, so that's why he wants to fight Sonic. Still pretty stupid.
Another stupidly easy fight. Eggman steals the emeralds, and we have another identical fight with Chaos 4. The egg carrier shows up, Knuckles runs off to the temple, and enters Lost World. We've got a bunch of water and these panels that are now completely useless because Knuckles can climb naturally. He gets another flashback, and Tikal worries about her father's actions. And here we see the Chow are an ancient species that lived alongside the echidnas. Knuckles returns to his altar and places the pieces back in the Master Emerald, but he's still missing a few. And I like how at this point you can actually see it repaired, even with the other characters. Knuckles hitches a ride on the egg carrier and reaches Skydeck. This is by far the most complicated of Knuckles' stages because there are multiple levels to it, and you have to use this lever to tilt the ship and open these doors. It can get pretty annoying. I spent over 20 minutes in here. Knuckles finds Sonic and Eggman after their clash, and Eggman runs off. Sonic chases after him, but now Knuckles has to fight Chaos 6. It's the same as before, only the freeze capsules are just there instead of Eggman dropping them. Knuckles defeats it and returns the last of the emerald pieces to Angel Island. It rises into the sky once again, and Knuckles is at peace, knowing he's done his job well. Now on to Amy. Her story starts a lot later than the others. After meeting Birdie, she finds Sonic almost immediately and heads into Twinkle Park. This level is structured similarly, only there's more enemies, less platforming, and this really annoying Hall of Mirrors. She gets separated from Sonic and winds up captured by Zero. I thought this happened in the Mystic Ruins. He takes her to the egg carrier where she's imprisoned, and Gamma is sent in to get Birdie. Amy refuses to give him up, and Gamma is confused by her willingness to help something she doesn't know. Because of this, he lets her go, and she offers to be friends with him. After a pointless game of whack-a-mole, which I'm convinced is the only reason she has a hammer, she winds up in Hot Shelter. It's a giant machine level with some conveyors and moving gears. Amy gets her vision and sees Tikal first meet the Chow, also learning they have a connection with, oh dear. She wakes up and finds Sonic and Tails, but Eggman snatches Birdie, revealing that he was holding on to a Chaos Emerald. Gamma shows up, and this time Amy just stops the fight altogether.
Do Sonic and Tails fight this guy or not?
Amy bids farewell to Gamma and flies off with Tails. Upon landing in Station Square, she decides she should be more independent and not rely on Sonic. She sees Birdie has a photo of his family, so she offers to help him find them. Turns out they're also being held captive, which leads us to Final Egg. This feels nearly identical to the last level, but with less moving parts and more lasers. They don't find Birdie's family and realize they're probably back on the egg carrier, so that was pointless. They head there and find the birds, but they're once again attacked by Zero. Amy decides she's done messing around and takes the oversized trash can head on. This is actually a pretty cool fight. He uses the same attacks as in the levels, but you have to hit him into this electric fence to open his weak spot and hit that. It's pretty fun. Zero explodes, the birds fly off, and Amy says she'll make Sonic respect her. Sure. Alright, Big, let's do this as fast as possible. After Froggy runs away, he chases him to Station Square, looks in the sewers, and then winds up in Twinkle Park. All that's here is a giant pool, and you have to fish him up. You grab him, but I guess that wasn't good enough because he's suddenly gone again. Now we go to Ice Cap. This level has a bunch of areas to run around, and because of that, it's nearly impossible to find the stupid wart bag. You literally have to break this ice just to find him. It's ridiculous. Then he disappears again, Tails finds him, and Big scares him off. We head back to Station Square and go to Emerald Coast. There's this little cove you can find, but other than that, it's just a beach. Grab the frog, but then we actually get a reason for why he disappears as Gamma swoops in and grabs grabs him. Big chases after him and winds up on the egg carrier. His final level is Hot Shelter, which feels the most like an actual level since you run through the small corridor, hit this button to flood the room, and then do your final round of fishing. Big gets a vision of Tikal, confirming the connection between Chaos and the 7 emeralds. He goes outside, finds Eggman and Chaos, Froggy spits out the emerald and gets absorbed into Chaos thanks to his tail. So now Big has to fight Chaos 6 by casting his line to fish out Froggy and railing.
That's it?
Big and Froggy hijack the Tornado 2, land back in the forest, and their lives go back to normal. Glad that's over. Only one left, Gamma. After Eggman boots him up, he orders him to go down Final Egg, which in this version is just a training room. After that, Eggman tests Gamma by forcing him to fight his predecessor, E101 Beta, who has the exact same moves and is really easy. He then orders Gamma and 3 other robots to find Froggy, which sends us to Station Square and Emerald Coast. It plays like how it did back with Sonic, but now more explosions. Gamma finds Froggy, and then gets a flashback where Tikal speaks of the Chow's guardian. He returns Froggy to the ship, and then sees Beta being reconstructed, which gives him a bit of a panic attack. Not surprising, this is the robot equivalent of walking in on open heart surgery. He then goes to the recently captured Amy, and we get the exact same cutscene as before. He grabs the jet booster, goes outside and fights Sonic, but is interrupted, and then escapes the egg carrier. He begins to question his mission from Eggman, so with Amy's words in his head, he decides it's best to save his friends. Although he has a weird definition of saving, as all of the remaining levels end with you destroying the other egg bots, E103 Delta, E104 Epsilon, and E105 Zeta. The remaining stages, Windy Valley, Red Mountain, and Hot Shelter, are just shortened versions of previous levels with a robot fight at the end. Delta and Epsilon are all the same as the fight with Beta earlier, but Zelta is unique since it's more like a giant turret you have to keep firing at. But after all of that, Gamma has one more challenge left to face, Beta Mark II. He has a bunch of new equipment this time, including rocket boosters, a shield, missile barrages, and a giant laser blast. Thankfully, the fight itself is really simple, just avoid his attacks and fire away. Beta does go down, but before exploding, he manages to hit Gamma with one last shot. Gamma sees a small bird fly away in peace as he succumbs to his injuries and is destroyed. Upon beating all 6 character campaigns, you unlock one last path, Super Sonic. Eggman finds the remnants of Chaos, Angel Island comes falling down, and Knuckles is attacked. Sonic and Tails go to investigate and find Knuckles and Eggman knocked out. Knuckles says Chaos stole the 6 Chaos Emeralds he had, and we get another flashback. Tikal tries to stop her father from taking the emeralds, but he charges past her and awakens Chaos. Tikal then attempts to stop the rampage by awakening the power of the emeralds and sealing both herself and Chaos inside the Master Emerald. So yeah, both of them were trapped in there for centuries until Eggman broke it and released them. Sonic wakes up, and he and Tails find the downed Tornado 2, which has the last emerald, but Chaos grabs it, meaning he now has all 7. He then attacks Station Square by completely flooding the place with water and transforming into his ultimate form known as Perfect Chaos. Eggman tries to stop it, but fails miserably. Then Tikal finally takes her true form, and Sonic says they can't seal Chaos away, they have to fight him. Everyone else then shows up, except Gamma, he's dead, and gives Sonic the Chaos Emeralds that were scattered. It turns out Chaos only absorbs the negative energy of the emeralds, but Sonic can absorb their real power. He then transforms into Super Sonic. Yeah, Super Sonic isn't usable in the levels, it's only in the final boss, something that will continue for the next decade worth of Sonic games. This fight is pretty simple. You have to fly across this water as fast as possible while avoiding the lasers, energy blasts, and tornadoes he shoots at you to slow you down. You have to run into him at max speed, so you go through his whole body and strike the head. And there he goes.
Well, that was pretty easy. Oh wait, we're still going?
Yep, there's a second half, which has even more attacks, and if you run out of rings, you have to start the whole fight all over again. That kinda sucks, but this boss is still pretty cool. And it begins one of my favorite Sonic traditions, an epic final boss theme performed by the band Crush 40. When Sonic finally beats him for real, Chaos returns to his normal form, no longer overwhelmed by hatred. Tikal encourages him to reunite with the Chow, and they all fly away. With everything taken care of, Eggman decides to get out of here, and Sonic runs off to parts unknown. And now, the game is done. There is that bonus level I mentioned earlier that you get for getting all the emblems, where you can play Emerald Coast as Metal Sonic, but it's just a different skin Sonic, so I'm good.
Sonic Adventure is a mixed bag. I can understand why it's so divisive nowadays because literally every single character has a different level of quality to them. Sonic is great, Knuckles is really good, Tails is decent, Gamma's okay, Amy's meh, and Big is awful. But thankfully the best character has the most amount of levels and the 2 worst characters have the fewest. Overall, I'd say I enjoyed my time with Sonic Adventure, and I'd recommend playing it if you're interested. And now enough time has passed so that it is finally acceptable to make those jokes. If you'll excuse me, I have an open mic night to get to.